right, well, into this conversation now about the Democratic Alliance are today briefing the media on its motion of no confidence to be tabled in the Gauteng Provincial Legislature against Premier David Makhura. The DA says Makhura has failed as the leader of the province and should be removed as a matter of urgency. Gauteng is South Africa's economic nerve centre and biggest contributor to the country's GDP. While it's geographically the smallest province in South Africa, it has more than 15 million people from all walks of life, making it the largest province in terms of population. While high levels of corruption, crime, service delivery failures, and the general deterioration of public facilities, such as hospitals, are not unique to the province, how much of the responsibility should be apportioned to the leadership in the province? Well, Professor Jannie Rossouw from the Business School, or the Wits Business School, I beg your pardon, joins us now to discuss why Gauteng's prosperity matters for South Africa. Prof, great to have you. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Leanne, and good morning to the viewers. Although I live in Gauteng and I can talk on it, I'm talking to you this morning from Maputo in Mozambique, where I'm on the 2022 Gulf Classic Car Rally. But so from Maputo, a good morning to everyone.
That's fantastic. Well, I hope you're having a good time, and thanks for taking out a couple of minutes to speak to us from there. So we'll get into it. And I mean, you know, we talk about Gauteng, and I mean, we always refer to Gauteng as the economic hub, the place where there are business opportunities, where, you know, the hustle and bustle of the city, where, you know, you have to hustle here in Johannesburg or wherever it is in Gauteng that you find yourselves to get around. But things are not looking that great when you look at it from just a visual appearance. But I want to get a review from you on the performance of Gauteng over the last couple of years. And perhaps you can include David Makhura's term as the Premier of the province. How is it doing?
Leanna, I want to start by saying we've just driven on this classic car rally from Pretoria to Maputo. The roads in Mozambique and on Eswatini we've been on were quite good. The roads in Gauteng, incidentally, were also quite good. The roads in Mpumalanga were not that great, but please, for a little classic car rally, this is a very limited sample to talk about. But my view is that things in Gauteng are better than in some of the other, call them more rural provinces, where people are really suffering. So from that perspective, although things are not always great in Gauteng, often things are better in Gauteng than in other of the outlying rural provinces in South Africa.
Mm. Well, I suppose we look at that and we understand, because there is a lot of money in this province. I mean, this is the gold city. One has to always sort of remember that. And there are a lot of business opportunities. There are a lot of massive local and international companies that have headquarters here in Johannesburg. But, you know, we talk about, in general, the deterioration of the province, and many are looking at it and saying that it is just not at a level that it should be. And perhaps you can give us a better understanding. Okay, great, if we compare it to maybe other provinces that don't have as much money, we're faring well. But in general, let's compare it to itself. How is it performing? I mean, can you agree with people that talk to the deterioration of this province?
No, of course I agree. I mean, the only province that is really setting a standard in South Africa at the moment is the Western Cape, where we have a DA government. It's the only province that gives at all a feeling that the politicians and the government, that they really care about the people. All the other provinces governed by the ANC, one gets the feeling that they only care about the ANC, they only care about staying in power. So from that perspective, Gauteng is not doing great, despite the fact that it is such an important economic hub, not only in South Africa, but also in Southern Africa. Incidentally, if Gauteng was an independent country in Africa, it would have been the 7th largest or 8th largest economy on the African continent. So Gauteng is the economic hub, but yes, it is not doing great. Relative to other ANC provinces, it is not doing too badly. Now, the problem, of course, is that the ANC is really a robber gang operating under the banner of a political party. And that is what we're experiencing in South Africa. And as a result of that, we see ANC provincial governments being challenged, and we see challenges at national government level by other political parties.
The country is generally infested with high levels of corruption, with crime, unfortunately, with hijacked buildings, cable theft, service delivery failures, a deterioration of public facilities. I mean, we look at hospitals that, I'm just going to focus, I don't want to focus nationwide because we are talking to Gauteng here at the moment. I mean, the hospital facilities here, we just take Charlotte Maxeke as an example of deterioration within the hospitals. Not to mention the other hospitals as well that are struggling. I know we speak to this and we try and apportion responsibility somewhere. So if we look at this and we say, well, let's look to the Premier, should he be the one taking responsibility as the overseer of the provinces for this breakdown?
Well, naturally, the Premier of a province must take responsibility in the same way as President Ramaphosa must take responsibility for South Africa overall. If they do not take responsibility, we really don't need them. I do not quite understand what the job description would be if responsibility would not be part of that job. But we must remember, Leanne, at the moment, there are only two things that matter in South African politics. The one is the ANC leadership contest in December of this year, and everything in the ANC is about that leadership contest. It's not about South Africa, it's not about the people of South Africa. And of course, after that, it's the general election in 2024. And all actions of all political parties we will see between now and 2024 will be about that election. And we have to accept that the ANC is very vulnerable in Gauteng because it kept Gauteng in the last general election with the smallest of margins imaginable. Gauteng is definitely one province where the ANC runs a real risk of being pushed under 50% of the support in the 2024 election, and political parties are going all out to achieve that objective. In that sense, Gauteng is a major political prize to be won by other political parties in 2024. And we have to see this motion of no confidence of the DA as part of a strategy for the 2024 general election in Gauteng.
Yeah. If we put things into perspective a little bit, what has the performance of the province pre-1994 and post-1994? I suppose we could perhaps look at the last 7 or 8 years under Makhura. What has this picture looked like? Is it a fast deterioration, a massive deterioration, or could we say, well, look, it hasn't been that bad?
Well, it's been a deterioration, as we've seen everywhere under the ANC. In certain instances, the deterioration accelerated. For instance, with infrastructure theft, like railway theft, even street lamp theft, the deterioration accelerated. In certain instances, it just stayed in a bad state. And at the same time, there was a massive inflow of people into Gauteng that meant that the infrastructure, especially housing backlog, continued to grow because of this inflow from the rest of South Africa. So it was not great, but it was not the worst in South Africa. Unfortunately, better is not good enough. So although Mr. Makhura was better is not good enough.
Yeah.
South Africa needs the best at the moment, and we are not getting that from Mr. Makhura. We are also not getting that from President Ramaphosa.
Yeah, and one has to really. We've got to be real. We look at many of the things that have gone wrong. I'm going to talk to just last week and how depressing it was watching what was going on in this province during last week. But I want to go a little bit further back. The party says, this is the DA saying that the public purse under his watch has been looted unabated. We talk about what happened with rampant corruption during COVID-19. That was just That's a very big blight on our history in this province, well, this country, and also the looting of schools. 431 million rand under Panyaza Lesufi as the Gauteng Education MEC. What the DA are doing right now, can we call it justifiable to call for his removal?
Yeah, of course it's justifiable. I mean, it's justifiable to call for the removal of the ANC in all forms of government at all levels. The ANC is not fit to govern South Africa. I mean, as a political party, the ANC cannot even govern itself. It has no money to pay the salaries of its own officials. If you can't even manage yourself, what hope do you have at all to manage a modern economy the size of that of South Africa, the complexity of that of South Africa? But Leanne, you touch on a very important point. The ANC is really in dire straits financially. As I've said, they can't pay salaries. And it has a very expensive general election coming up in 2024. So it has all the reason of being a corrupt organization in this period to try and get resources. My other major concern for the 2024 election, we have a party that can steal money. So likewise, a party like that can steal an election. So we must make very sure that we have a free and fair election in 2024. And the one thing I ask for is transparent ballot boxes, like a Perspex ballot box, so that it's obvious to voters that no ballot papers are packed in the ballot box before the election starts. We can no longer in South Africa take the risk of a non-transparent carton box type of ballot box like we've had up to now. I will not put it beyond the ANC to steal an election. They've stolen a lot of money.
Also, unresolved issues. I mean, when we look at something like e-tolls, which are unique to Gauteng, I mean, we drive under these big, massive structures all the time. It's been a big sticking point for Gauteng motorists and perhaps a really big indicator of a bigger South African government failure to make clear policy decisions. And this is, I suppose, in the purview of the national government, then provincial. At some stage, we even saw the Premier David Makhura joining protests against the national government. Does the hanging on to e-tolls issue reflect on him or the national government? I mean, don't we need some decisive leadership that says, okay, well, it's over, it's not working, let's move on and decide on something else?
Well, clearly, Mr. Makhura and some people in his Gauteng provincial government, they are against e-tolls, whereas the national government and some people in the national government still support e-tolls. And that is what we see in many instances in the ANC. The party is split on just about every possible issue, and therefore the inability of Mr. Ramaphosa to take the country forward. So there's no doubt that Mr. Makhura is not in favor of e-tolls and would like to see other funding models for the road expansion in the province, whereas in the national government, there is still support for e-tolls. So again, an ANC that's split on just about every possible issue.
Yeah, I want to talk about what we saw unfolding here in South Africa. In Gauteng. I mean, when we talk about Tembisa, there's also again been demands from the DA in Gauteng that Makhura must initiate an investigation into the violence that broke out in Tembisa over service delivery. I mean, service delivery is an issue everywhere, but we saw the violence that happened in Tembisa. Then, of course, the situation around Zamazamas, also out in the Krugersdorp area, and what was happening there with communities taking the law into their own hands. And this is happening all over and more in communities that are feeling that the government is failing them, and that it's just when it comes to getting service delivery, when it comes to leadership, there is a failure, and they are living in conditions that are just absolutely unacceptable. What are your views on this? I mean, let's just take what we saw happening in Gauteng yesterday as one example.
Yeah, I agree. We have a lot of people living in unacceptable living conditions. And at the same time, we see politicians living like literally kings with big motorcades, with flashing lights, pushing other South Africans off the road. Really, acting as if they have no idea what is going on in the country. So I fully agree with you. It's time for Mr. Makhura, for his government, and for ANC leaders at all levels to wake up. I mean, I get the feeling that they do not even read the newspapers because they have no idea what's going on in the country. They don't watch TV programs, they don't listen to the radio because they are completely removed from what the ordinary South African sees in the country happening. It's as if our political leaders have no idea what's going on in our country.
Just a final question to you as we wrap up this interview. It is 7 o'clock right now, but I mean, when we look at the issue of illegal immigrants also here in Gauteng, coming in, looking for job opportunities, looking for work, this is of course having a very dire impact on infrastructure development. When we talk about inner city renewal, town planning, rural infrastructure, places like Yeoville and Hillbrow, many say that you struggle to find a local there. And I'm not talking about legal immigrants, I'm talking about illegal immigrants that are making their way into the city and basically taking over. What do you make of this as well?
Of course, illegal immigrants are a problem. You need to manage such a problem. This government is not managing the problem. They just make weird and wonderful statements about a problem of some sorts. But at the same time, it's the same government that makes it very difficult for people with valid passports to come to South Africa as tourists. So we have a huge illegal immigrant problem, but if you have a valid passport and you want to visit South Africa, you have so many requirements to meet that tourists simply stay away, which is also bad for the South African economy.
All right, we'll leave it there. Prof, thanks so much for joining us. Professor Jannie Rossouw from Wits Business School discussing the importance of the Gauteng province as the biggest contributor to the country's GDP at about 35% of total GDP. Its economy really depending on mining, manufacturing, finance and business services. But of late, we've just been seeing real issues that are plaguing the province, and that was under discussion, and also the DA calling for a vote of no confidence against the Premier announcement coming later on this morning. But right now, let's get into our